next time I'm down there.
Can you just tell me what you just said? Because what you just said was not recorded.
Yeah, so what I
No,
was saying,
you said something personal and something very endearing to my heart. You've
I
already
did.
forgot it?
Yeah.
You said you said that you miss me.
Oh, yes, yes. I just said that, in fact. I do miss you.
You
And I
did say
love every time we get together, I'm always happy that we did. Like,
how
it's
how
great.
did we I keep on asking this, but how did you Google us? Google me?
I remember how we first started talking. I think I saw something on LinkedIn from you, and it really resonated with me because you know it's very helpful to learn from other CTOs and technical topics. That's all good, but there was something about the thing you posted. And I don't remember what it was. I just remember that it resonated with me in a way that was like, well,
You were
we're
like,
actually
this
looking
is
at these
no,
things
you were
deeper than
no, no, no,
technology.
no. You were like, dude, this is so inappropriate. Who is this guy?
There was also that. There was also that, and equally attractive. Um, So I remember I just kind of pinged you. I messaged you and said, "Hey, this has really resonated. What's up?" And then we ended up having a couple calls, and I think just by talking, we found a lot of similarities in terms of how we approach things, even how we approach life. Forget technology. So I think that's how it was all born.
Yeah, I remember pacing up and down LAX talking to you. Was it LAX? I would remember just walking up and down the airport talking to you. And yeah, there was a moment where I was thinking, man, this is my guy.
Yeah, I was like, this guy's a brother, like
And
end to end.
we're both Africans.
Yes, that's right. Go Egypt.
Do Egyptians consider themselves African?
Most do. There's a lot that there's a debate. Like, are we part of the Middle East? Are we part of Africa? We're
Yeah,
part of
yeah. I mean,
Africa.
that's a tough
We're,
one. I mean, it's
we're
not
part of
really.
Africa.
Yeah.
It's African.
You know how countries are on continents?
Yes.
Egypt is on the African continent.
Yeah, there isn't much logic in African cultures.
Yeah, you're right. It's we're all tribal and
That's right.
we all try to carve things out. Yeah, I mean, even as I say we're both Africans, it feels strange, you know. I mean, I'm white and I feel
And I'm not.
part of me feels do I have the right to say I'm African? And
Yeah.
I'm 10th generation African. I mean, it's the only
Wow.
continent I know and it's my home. I miss it.
Yeah. I totally get the feeling.
I miss very, very much that I'm not there.
Really? Well, how long has it been since you've been there?
Well, we moved about 22, 23 years ago,
Hmm.
and I would attribute it to youthful youthful ignorance plus political chaos.
Yeah. Sure.
So sort of youthful ignorance in we're going to travel and explore the world, and then we fell in love with the world.
Yeah. Me
And
too.
then the political chaos in South Africa, where if because you're white you can't get a job, and because of all the murders and all the war on white people,
Yeah.
we technically can't go back.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
It's complex. Well,
Yeah.
and then you have this feeling of, well, white people were murdering black people in South Africa
That's
for
right.
decades and
That's right.
decades, and so yeah, it's just a strange thing. I have my own pain, I have my own struggles, um, but it's not greater than anyone else's pain and struggles, and it's not less than anyone else's pain and struggles, or maybe it is. Thank you,
That's
Imad. That was a great
no
chat.
comparison. Yeah, thank you. I
Yeah.
had a very different experience, by the way. Like, I was born in Cairo. My parents immigrated when I was a baby to Glendale, California, from Cairo, and
Sounds like a Simpsons episode.
yeah, it totally does. It actually was, and I don't know. Growing up, right up to teenage years, I had this like strong pride in being Egyptian, and it was a big part of who I am, and I had this idealistic thing, and we would go back every year, every other year in the summers, and I distinctly remember a trip. 14 years old, I went back, and I was so happy to be back and explore my country and blah blah blah. And, I mean, literally, when I got there, they took one look at me and they're like, "You're American." And I remember it broke my heart. It was like, what? And then I remember coming back here and people were like, "Well, you look different. Where are you from?" I'm like, "Oh, Los Angeles." "No,
That
where are you
is,
really from?" I'm like,
oh,
"Okay, so I don't belong there and I don't belong here." And
isn't,
so it just started this like identity journey, right? Where you come to terms with the fact that you're both, and that's okay.
and that is okay. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
never forget flying back to South Africa. So oft in the late 90s, where we were the Rainbow Nation, and Mandela had created this unbelievable reconciliatory tone, and the country was felt like it was on a good wicket. Um, it was cool to go and travel, and oh yeah, we
Yeah.
live in London. Oh yeah, we live in Germany. We live in, and all the South Africans were like, oh man, go do it. So proudly South African, and it's cool. Tell me more about it. Tell me all these things,
Right.
and I will never forget. I think in the early 2000s, it stopped being cool. Stopped being cool to say you're not in the country anymore. And
Interesting.
stories about travels, and stories about how, oh, I live in America, and everything is great. It just stopped being. It started becoming something that we were a bit embarrassed to say.
Interesting.
And of course, then your accent starts changing a little bit, and then people start saying, "Oh, so first thing you do when you see friends and family is like, where are you guys? Oh, we're in San Diego. Oh, oh, okay, you guys left
One
the
of you.
country."
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
It really is. It's yeah. But it's part of who you are no matter what.
Well, yeah, and so
So
it's not a tragedy for me so much. It's more like the tragedy for me is when you lose that bond with your home country to the point where you're neither them or you're neither us, and so now you
yes.
are your own thing.
Yes, that's
And
right.
like you said, you have to be okay with that.
Yeah. It's like it's just part of who you are, you know. Yeah.
Great. Well, Imad, welcome to the CTO studio.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
What are you up to?
Oh, so much, So, as you know, I run my own consulting practice, Georgy
Imad,
Technology Leadership.
GeorgyTechnologyLeadership.com. That's a long .com, dude.
It's not .com, but we're committed to scaling organizations and architecture. So we do a lot of work with CTOs and their leadership teams, and sometimes with a lot of business teams as well, because a lot of times it's the business teams that really don't understand their technology partners, and it goes hand in hand.
Who do you feel like you're most valuable to? To the CEO or to the CTO?
Definitely to the CTO. But
So you're
in the
not you're
end,
not getting you're not getting phone calls from CEOs saying, "Dude,
well, the funny thing is, I do a retro every year on my business, right? And the funny thing is, most of my business actually comes from CEOs.
yeah, yeah,
And sometimes it's under a bit of I'll call it a false premise.
mm,
Come in here, my dev team and my are so slow. We need to fix them. And then you
every
get in
time."
there, and I really take my voice seriously as a consultant because having been a CTO for many years, I know you can have the greatest ideas in sliced bread, and then a consultant comes in, has the same idea, and all of a sudden it's listened to, right? But I take it
You
as
have just defined parenting.
yes. Yeah, so I take that responsibility seriously in that I can be an advocate and a voice for the truth and for the team and for the CTO, where I can come in and go, okay, the premise is the team is too slow. But when we get into root causes, you start to understand, oh, well, actually, product roadmap's broken, or actually they're dealing with a lot of fires, and here's what the actual issue is. And unfortunately, especially in this COVID era now, everyone's so busy they don't have time to dig into the root causes. Maybe once or twice. Um, and so I can come in from the outside perspective and
Mm.
not only look at the root causes, but surgically recommend, like, here's what we're going to do about this. So whatever we spend time and money on, we're going to fix this for the long term.
Now, do you find that CTOs, because a good friend of mine, Aaron Longwell, a member of 7 CTOs, we had a long chat about the consultant's sort of dilemma where companies really only bring in consultants when they've admit that they failed.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine if I'm a CTO and my CEO calls in outside help, well, what is that communicating to me as the CTO?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a big part of what I initially do is you got to build trust. And part of this is to help people understand, like, I'm there to help. I've been fortunate in that, I mean, this is going to sound a little arrogant, but everyone I've worked with, I can't think of a single person I work with that hasn't become better. And the reason why, and better can be defined in a lot of different ways, right? But the reason why is that, it's my life's passion. It's not just the business. My life's passion is to grow better leaders in this world. And I take that very seriously. And a part of that is you got to build trust. You got to come in there and go, look, I'm here to actually help. And one of the things I did when I first started the business was commit that my business is dedicated to growing and scaling and not reducing and cutting. So companies can find all sorts of people to do that. That's not what I do. I'm going to come in and help you grow and scale. If you want to figure out how to cut a team, that's not me. And I've
So
turned
you,
down business because of that.
so you, that's like the first, like I come in and that's like, just so you know, I'm not here to cut, I'm here to grow.
That's right. And still sometimes you might be brought in like, okay, well, we need to cut this team in half. But then you dig in and you find out, actually, that's not the problem.
Mm.
And I've got some stories to share on that as well in a bit. But, I'm dedicated to growing and scaling. And I had a client once tell me after a week with them, they said, if you could productize the way you build trust. But part of that is just, having worked with a number of teams that were extremely difficult in the beginning. And I mean, there's people in companies now, and it's not their fault, where after so many years of being burnt out, after so many years of rejected opportunity or lack of growth, they close that little window of hope that anything could actually change. And I think it's our responsibility as leaders to come in and get them to just open it a bit, just a
Mm.
bit, and then follow through like a motherfucker. That's the technical term. And let them know that actually, no, we can't change, and you do have a role in this. And if you are able to spark that, boy, all sorts of magical things can happen.
So it sounds like it's a mission to restore some self-belief and rise some self-esteem, because sometimes people are just beat down by
Oh yeah,
past
yeah,
failures.
and it's much more serious than that. I mean, when you look at companies as a whole, we're talking about technology teams here, but in general, there's a massive amount of leadership debt piling up. And you could look at all layers of society to apply that. And I think it's our responsibility to start chipping away at that deliberately and resolving this because it's too much for people to handle. At the end of the day, everyone goes to a job because they want to take care of their families, but they also want to be part of something greater than themselves. They do want to believe in something, right?
So,
Um,
so you've made, so I think where I kind of want to start here is you've made this transition from
yeah,
CTOs of large enterprises into deciding to run your own consulting firm.
yes,
So, do you want to give us a quick, like, where do you come from corporately? And then I'm really
sure.
curious, so many CTOs I talk to who want to do, they want to start with sort of a side hustle. And really, it's not really a side hustle, it's more like I'd love to get in and solve other people's problems a little bit, or be the fresh eyes on maybe a small retainer. I love my job and I'm still doing what I'm doing, but I do also need some creative problem solving time in other domains. All the way through to I just cannot be employed by someone. I am my own boss. I want to be my own fractional CTO to other companies. Do you want to walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. Once upon a time. Uh, yeah, so
Hey, Nikolai, remember to cue in the unicorns and rainbows music.
I speak my language now. Um, yeah, I've been CTO for over 20 years now at various enterprises, and also at a couple of startups. So I've done it from the ground up, where I've had to, wear multiple hats. Most recently, I was CTO at Experian, where I led global technology there, and a number of other enterprise brands. And I think a lot of the more enterprise brands that have brought me in because of the entrepreneurial spirit that I have, the pragmatic approach of cutting through bureaucracy. I think a lot of times people come into an enterprise company and you try to figure out how to fit in as a technology leader. Like, how do I work within the system? And I would just say, fuck the system. I would just say, hey, listen, like, this system's actually not working. So what do we do about this? So,
Mm.
as an example, one of those jobs when I came in, I had 8 VPs reporting to me. I had global responsibility. They had their PowerPoints all ready to go to kind of give me the lay of the land. And I mean, within 5 minutes, I got bored. And I'm like, this is okay. I mean, a lot of times, I can't even remember the last time those guys actually spoke to their teams, right? So now we're debating in a meeting, talking in a meeting about the matrix. It's not actually the truth. It's a fake world that we've developed with pie charts and graphs and all sorts of stuff. And I want to get to the truth. Like, I'm a truth lover. I want to get to the truth. So I said, hey, when was the last time you attended a sprint review? Oh, we don't have time for that. We have meetings all day. Like, what are you talking about? So the very next day, as the CTO of 1,000+ organization globally across 30 different countries, I attended every sprint review for the next 2 weeks. And then I went back to my VPs and I said, here you go. I made the time. Now you have no excuse. And here's what I learned, by the way. I learned all sorts of different things that are actually the opposite of what you're telling me. And so some of those things, you've got to, I mean, and that's not scalable. You can't attend every sprint review, of course. But it was making a point. It's like, look, whether you're in an enterprise company or you're at a startup, you've got to stick to doing the work, to be in the weeds, and to stick to the truth.
Well, and I think you're highlighting sort of that first 100 days approach, which is
Oh, yeah.
I need to be like I almost think to myself, you got to be in all the meetings from the smallest to the biggest,
Yes.
because you need to hear what people have to say. You
Yes,
need
that's
to
right.
see how they're processing things and to get to that truth.
That's exactly right. Um, I'll give you a quick story about that. I don't know how we got into this, but we're going to get into it. There was a
Get
story that
into everything.
I love it. This is why I love talking to you. There was a story I heard many years ago, true story, about the CEO of a dog food company, and their sales just started to tank, and he couldn't understand why, and he said, "Okay, well, we have a marketing problem." So he went to his CMO, and they changed the campaigns. Still nothing. They said, "Okay, well, our marketing department must suck." So they fired a few people, put them on plan, brought in new folks. Still the same problem. Then they're like, okay, well, our marketing team is just not working. So they let go of the CMO and the entire marketing team. They outsourced marketing to an agency. Still the same thing. Finally, out of frustration, and now we're going on 3 to 4 quarters of lack of performance. And as a CEO, you know what that happens, what the risk is. So he got up out of frustration, all hands meeting, and just said, I don't know what to do. And in the very back of the room, one of the lower level managers sort of raised his hand and said, I know the problem. I said, please, like, tell me. And the manager said, the dogs don't like the food. And it was like, what? So, like in the CEO's mind, he's making quick decisions. He's being decisive. Right? He hired an agency. He fired the marketing team. He did this. But he was focused on the exact wrong thing. And this happens in every team and company, we think we know what the problem is, and even if we act quickly, we're actually making it worse. And so that's why it's so important to actually have people that are plugged into the ground floor,
Mm.
into our customers, into our
That
team members.
Yeah, and I think that's the skill that every executive should bring to the table. But I think specifically with CTO types,
I'll
the
tell you
root
this,
the
Etienne.
root cause analysis.
Yes, I mean, one thing that I heard I drives me crazy about, so I coach a lot of technology, first-time technology managers as well as CTOs, but um, the advice that people get is, okay, well, now you need to focus on people. Leave the engineering. That was when you were an engineer. Now you're a manager. You've got to now focus on people, which there's some credit to that. But actually, as technologists, we bring something very unique to the leadership table, and that's that engineering mentality. I actually coach people to never lose it because our mentality is what did we get into code? Like, why did I get into it? Because it's black and white. I understand exactly what the problem is. It doesn't compile, it doesn't build. I debug the hell out of it, and I get it to work, right? So, and I don't stop until it works. So that mentality of getting to root cause and solving it at the root, that needs to stay with you as an engineer.
Well, so let's explore something for a second. Oftentimes, as entrepreneurs, we're taught that we have to hire the right people to get the things done.
Right.
Now, let's just, as a thought experiment, put that on its head and say, identify the things and then have the people do it.
That's right. I mean, that's what I dedicated with my clients is that whatever solution we work on is going to be so surgical to the exact root cause that you will only spend money and time on that, and then it will be solved forever.
So I,
And
I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say a big, a very flippant, I think, solution oftentimes is we just need to hire more people. You hear that from business people. You hear that from techies too. Like, oh, if we only had three more people, right? And sometimes that's not the issue. Sometimes the issue is actually not giving my existing people an opportunity. Because I believe like one of the principles of leadership is for us to dig into our people and understand the hidden gems in the organization. Like sometimes someone just needs a different shot or a different training or whatever, and that's often a lot easier than bringing someone in from the outside.
Well, and I think that the the it requires effort to understand, to put yourself in someone's shoes. So it requires
Yes,
effort. Um, Effort requires time, and there are only so many hours in the day. So I think by you going straight to those sprint review meetings, you're basically bypassing everyone's opinions, bias, exhaustion, numbness, and you go straight to the thing, and you're
yes,
demonstrating, I want to learn about the thing. I want
that's
to
right.
know the thing that you're working on. I respect you enough to want to work on you with your thing, instead
That's
of,
right.
I respect you so much, I don't want to know about the thing
That's exactly right.
because I have to go do this other thing. And so when you can cut through that, you can, your people are, I mean, I think it's going to be tricky when your people say, whoa, what is the CTO of Experian doing in our meetings? Is someone getting fired?
Yes, but then they get used to it. And so part of it is, that's building trust too. Is like you over time show them that actually there isn't a consequence
Yeah. And then
to
also,
doing it.
Imad, I'm thinking, if you then can show on that thing or on that ticket or on that item or the problem that's trying to be solved, that you are actually adding a little bit of value to that. Like, oh, have you guys considered maybe, what would happen if we did this instead of that? And you're just demonstrating that you're in there with your people.
Yep.
I think that requires so much effort though, because you're thinking, ugh, if for me to understand whether we should re-platform this particular microservice. I have to now go in and we of all people know how much effort it takes to think about the pros and cons, to try and then imagine future scaling issues. But that requires so much effort that we resist doing that stuff. I know some
Yes,
CTOs who don't even log into their own products
a big
because
no-no.
it's customer service. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's a big no-no. I mean, that's a, as engineers, one of the values that we have, whether you know it or not, is firsthand experience. Experiential knowledge is so key because as you rise up in leadership, one of the things I've noticed is that you get really extreme levels of granularity of information. So you either get really broad brushstrokes or you get a focus on a very specific event. Like, hey, did you hear, Mr. CTO, that in the last sprint review of this team, Emad, that problem developer, he was bitching and moaning and complaining, and we really have a cultural problem here. And it could have been that the guy was just having a bad day or whatever, but all of a sudden now we're talking about it in a leadership circle. And it's like, what is going on? So either you're talking about something super granular that's not indicative of the bigger problem, or you're talking in a broad brushstroke, like, we got to rewrite the whole architecture. And then you attend a sprint review and they're like, actually, I developed a set of APIs to integrate our legacy system. Oh, cool. Okay. So, you oftentimes find the truth is actually a lot less extreme than the things that you're discussing.
Mm.
And the way I coach people on it too with this whole sprint review thing is that one sprint review I attended for whatever, an hour or two, is more valuable than my full day of meetings. I probably learned more in that could fuel my strategy. One of the things I love to do on sprint reviews is, and sometimes just for fun, I'll say it on the way out, but on the way out of the review is, oh, so all these changes that we need to make, I don't want to see a single one of those in the next sprint review. And people, what? And I think part of that is, some of that is realistic and some of that is not. Some are more systemic issues, but the key is, if we're coming up with improvements in a sprint review, it's not to document an action item and look at trends. It's, we got to actually change it. Like, when you go into the next sprint, you got to carve out time to actually change it and
So
make it better.
what does a good sprint review meeting look like to you?
Ooh, spicy. Well, I think number one, it's got to be really balanced, right? Take time. We often don't, as engineers, take time to look at what's working well. We're like, oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, working well. Let's move on now, or let's get to the problems. But that's just as valuable. So I think it's got to be balanced, and then I think it's got to have some open conversation where everybody has a voice. I do love. I mean, everybody uses it now. The whole post-it sort of thing instead of speaking up, because you do invariably have introverts in the group. You have people who are quieter than others. So you want everyone's voice to come to the table. And then the third is, it's got to translate into change, into some action. Otherwise, why are we doing the review? So if we're going to come up with a list of changes, we need to walk out of there with who's going to make the change and by when. Sounds very basic, but most people don't do that.
Give me some examples. I'm putting you on the spot, but give me some examples of changes that you've seen people ask for.
Oh, I've seen all sorts of things. So I'll give you a couple examples. A lot of it has to do with systems and environments. Hey, we don't have the right environment for this. Hey, we don't have a proper testing environment. We don't have a proper environment. It takes me forever to debug, right? And it's just something we've lived with. It becomes a paradigm, like, okay, build system slow. Oh well, like, we're never going to do anything about it. So those are things that you really want to pay attention to, because now someone's mailed it in. They've given up and they've said, well, this is just how it is. And fast forward, that's going to be one of the reasons why they leave the organization, right? Not because of the thing itself, maybe because of the thing itself, but also because I didn't have a voice. Nobody listened to me. Nothing changed. Not a good recipe. So a lot of it's things like that. A lot of it is people-wise. I'm in too many meetings. That's a lot. Hey, I had too many meetings, right? I can't focus. Lots of scope change. I think is a trend, like switching too
priority
much,
issues.
especially in this COVID era, right? Like, oh my God, like we've had to pivot how many times this sprint? I can't keep track. I've even seen things as simple as I had a team once say, um, my organization does not allow me to have whiteboards on wheels.
Does not allow you to what?
Have whiteboards on wheels. And we'd love to have that, but we're never going to get that. And there was somebody who was in charge of that decision that was exercising a lot of power, let's just say. And so I had heard about that in my first 90 days of the engagement, and I made it my priority to get that team whiteboards on wheels, and we made it happen. Right,
Whiteboards
so
on
it's a
wheels.
physical. I mean, it's not the. Yeah, it's kind of funny when you think about it, but it became
No,
like a
no,
physical.
it's sad.
It's sad, but once we made it happen, it became a daily physical reminder that we can change things. It was so powerful.
Maybe that manager had a previous traumatic experience with whiteboards on wheels.
Maybe he was attacked.
Maybe he was trying to help his team by not having, like when you write on it, maybe the whiteboard moves back. And he was like, that will never happen to any team I manage ever again.
Yeah, it's just crazy. It's like, and then the team is living this going, I can't even get a whiteboard on wheels. How am I going to believe I can change the software platform?
It's very demoralizing when you take the time to give someone feedback and you feel like it's not only not acted upon, but then you start feeling like you're not heard.
It's why I've left every job in my career, feeling that I don't have a voice. At its root, I mean, there are other reasons, but at its root, that's what it is.
Yeah, we wanna have we wanna feel valued, and a great way to devalue someone is to say, I can see your mouth move, but I have no interest in what you have to say.
Thanks, but no thanks.
So just a final thought on the sprint reviews. Something that I find myself terrified of is sort of the two things: a loud voice that seems uncompromising and frustrated, and what that does to the team.
Yep.
And secondly, my own desire to just instantly solve people's problems and not to be able to sit with those problems and say, as a husband to my wife, I get this a lot, which is, can you just listen? Like, I'm just like, I want to solve it. And actually, it's not because I want to help her, it's because I want to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
And so you have the loud voice, how do you keep it positive? And then you have the resisting the urge to just solve everyone's problems as a people pleaser. What do you say to that?
Speaking my language. Oh my gosh. This is why I love you, man. So let's break it down. Let's take the first one. So the first one around the loud voice. I believe in our society, and especially business, we suffer from what I call the disease of dichotomies. And what that means is that everything is an either or. So loud, bad, complying, good. And we look at the loud voices in the room and go, ooh, problem. How do I manage that? And yes, there are some loud voices, don't get me wrong, that are toxic to a team. And there are ways to manage that. But majority of the time, when I see a loud voice that's uncompromising, I want to spend more time with that person. That person cares. It's coming out in the wrong way, but that person cares. The worst thing that we can get as leaders is indifference. The worst thing that we can get as software companies for our software is indifference. When a customer hates an issue, right, loudly complaining, calling you all the time, filing support tickets, it's because they care. It's because they want the software to work. It's because of how critical the software is to their day-to-day life. If they didn't care, you wouldn't hear from them at all. And it's, by the way, the same thing in relationships, right? With your wife, with my girlfriend, with anybody else. You get a woman to be quiet, oh shit, like, it's over. Like,
That
you want
that
the
is
passion,
terrifying.
you want emotion.
That is
You want
terrifying.
emotion one way or the other because it's the person cares.
Okay, so the loud voice or the negative, not to be afraid that that voice is deteriorating the team morale.
It's actually a source of, I've got to spend more time and build more trust with that person. So I'll give you a quick story. We have time for stories, yeah?
Yeah,
So
there's lots of time.
with one of my clients, I came in and, as you know, I have a playbook on what makes a healthy technology strategy, and, spent some time, did one-on-ones with the whole technology team, and then I got up and we did all hands, and I was basically laying out this inspirational, technology vision of what we're going to do moving forward. And everybody was really resonating with it, nodding their heads, and this one guy, so before that presentation, I had one-on-ones, and he was the same. He was the loud voice, very skeptical, bitter almost. And then in some of the smaller group meetings, he did the same thing. Well, why should we follow you? And, just kind of speaking up. And I kind of noticed, I was like, I like this guy. I get attracted to that stuff. So I like the challenge. In this all hands in front of everybody, he kind of raised his hand and he said, you know how many times you've seen a presentation like this? I said, okay. So why are you any different? And I said, it's not about me. I said, there's nothing. I'm like, you're right. I'm like, there's nothing that I can say to you in words in this meeting that's going to build trust. Trust is built through action. And I'm committed to that. And if you're committed to that, let's work together on that. And I ended up spending a lot more time with him than the others and sitting down and talking to him. And the more we started talking, granted, they're very rough conversations, don't get me wrong, right? I found that this is a guy who cares. And at the end of every conversation, he gave me a huge hard time. How are you going to measure this? How do you know you're going to be successful? And I took everything. I was like, okay, let's wrestle with that. And then anywhere where I didn't know, I told him, I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that question. Let's figure it out together, right? So I didn't bullshit him. And at the end of every one of those one-on-one conversations, I found that he just said, well, whatever you need me to do, I'll do. And so he was dedicated, right? But you didn't get to that gem until you worked through all that. If I just saw him as the loud voice in the room and said, oh, problem, gotta manage him, right? I'm not going to get to that hidden gem. Today, this was years ago, today he is the company's director of engineering. He was just a software developer back then that was seen as a bitter guy and the loud voice. Now he pings me every now and then and says, okay, how do I inspire people to be better? And how do I do this? I'm so proud of him. I just love that. But, and I've had countless stories like that in my career and with my clients. It's, we can't write people off. We gotta, as leaders, stay the course and see that there's passion there. How do I tap into it? Now, after you give them an opportunity, if they don't take advantage of the opportunity, okay, well, there's different actions that you take, obviously, and now that's a toxic voice. But I would say the majority of the time, it's just someone that's really wants to see a leader saying the truth and spending time on important issues.
It's something that is key to emotional intelligence, I think, which is the self-awareness and then the self-management. Yes. And so when that type of response happens, I had a response like this yesterday to a plan that I presented, and clearly the CEO didn't buy it. And I was asking the CEO for a stretch. I was asking him to stop asking me when something will be done, and let's commit to a plan to deliver the best results. And yes, and I gave him a mild, I think it's going to be, I'm pretty sure we can get it done this year. When really what he wanted to hear me say was, by the end of this quarter, it will be done.
Right.
So I had to, and then I could see in the presentation, he did the classic, like he will move back and,
Yep.
And the co-founder was like, give me more, give me more, give me more. The co-founder was excited. And I was only halfway through my presentation, and I got the clear signal from the CEO that he's not really pleased. I had to notice in my own self that I was feeling bad about myself.
Yep.
And I could, and the more I spoke, the more I started speaking to me,
Yes.
the more I tried to make me feel like just calm down, calm down, calm down, you know? And man, I mean, you would think that I would have conquered this stuff by now, but I felt like shit. And
And
I'm talking about this is happening in seconds. In
yes.
seconds, this thing is degrading. And so
Yeah.
now the voice in my head, I'm no longer talking to the CEO. I am now talking to me. And
That's
I'm
right.
trying to be like, hey, everything's cool. I'm still a great CTO. This plan, I still stand by this plan. But now I notice I'm getting a bit defensive. So now I'm getting a little angry. Like, dude, you CEOs always want dates. You always think it's simple. Now and I'm talking about seconds, and I'm talking about this is happening in my head
Oh yeah.
during sentences as I'm talking. I'm like, time is
Yep.
slowing down, and so and this is in EQ. You're like, okay, if I can be an observer, I'm like, you know what, Etienne, you're freaking out right now. Take a chill pill. The plan is great. The plan is the same. You would say this to any CEO. What's really happening is he is having to deal with his own discomfort that he's not getting what he wants.
That's right.
So now I have to move from, okay, you know what, I'm okay. Then I have to move into the self-management. So I did that. So self-awareness, I'm freaking out. Self-management, relax, you know.
Yep.
Then it goes into social management, right? So now you have to say, I now have to help this CEO regulate and manage. And so the first thing I did when I was calmed down and when I felt better about myself, in other words, I'm not defensive, I'm not pissed off, I've put
Yeah.
that person away. I was then able to say to the CEO, hey, I feel a frustration in the force.
Very
Dude,
good.
called him out in a very fun, playful way. And he was like, the CTO named my emotion. I can just relax. And now from a place of safety, I can now communicate where I'm coming from as a CEO. And so, and that just happened yesterday.
Wow.
And he sent me a video and spoke with me, just told me how much he appreciated it. But it was an interesting journey inside of me because I've been hired to make a difference. There's high
Hmm.
expectations. There's a positive vibe. I'm in the first 100 days, so there's not that much accountability yet for decisions I've made.
Yeah.
I still get to point to decisions that were made before me. And so when I start delivering the bad news, that's when that's what starts happening, like with that person you spoke with. You didn't, you had to manage your own emotions. You had to then identify what was happening for that person, and then you could have that person.
Yes.
You identified that it was an actions thing. You actually identified that it was a trust issue, and you were able to speak to that versus his ostensible lack of respect for for this presentation.
Yeah. Okay. So everything you just said is golden. I mean, this is why you're such a great leader in CTO. Right. I love that you did that. So I really
Thank you.
commend you because it's my own journey as well. You know, we all struggle with that and being able to stop. But I'll tell you something. I was talking to my girlfriend last night about how sometimes it's like in my head it's like a White House press briefing. You go up to the podium, you tap the microphone, and go, "Will all the voices please just shut up so I can think clearly?" Like there's just too much going on, you know. And part of that is something that I call, and you described it, thought velocity. if you notice as awareness, when my thought velocity increases, the thoughts just start going
Oh,
like that.
yes,
Something's
yes.
up,
Because that's what
and
happened to me.
that's right. And you slowed it down. You slowed it down, like consciously, like okay, stuff's racing. Like wait a minute, what? And all of a sudden you react, and it's like whoa, what just happened?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So I think slowing down the thought velocity is really key.
Mm,
And the other thought that it triggered for me is that I spent many years working with at-risk high school youth, right? And part of that in one stint was that there was a certain program that they wanted you to sort of walk through with the youth. Like, we're going to walk through this program. And I would often abandon the program because I would look at the room and go, they're not paying any attention to this. They're bored out of their minds, with what we're doing. I completely stop and go, this is boring, right? Everybody looked at me like, what?
yes, like
And I was like,
naming it.
so it's just like what you described. Like when you sit and you name it, people want the truth, and then they know that you're not focused on your message; you're focused on them, and
So
that's
true,
what builds
man.
trust.
And
That's
it's
exactly what builds
disarming.
trust.
Yeah, it's disarming. It disarms everyone's defenses, but it is
Yeah.
difficult. I saw a couple months ago probably one of the worst experiences of my life as a CTO.
Mm.
I saw a CEO destroy his company in front of me over a Zoom call.
Wow.
And after the call, him and I spoke. And honestly, I was embarrassed to be in the C-suite with this person. And the team was about 20 people, and it was a disaster. Honestly, one of the worst things I'd ever seen, or let me put it this way: one of the worst things in my professional career that I'd ever been a part of.
Wow.
And I was, like I
Says a
said, I was
lot.
ashamed. And so him and I were able to debrief afterwards, and to his credit, he first words out of his mouth was, I fucked up. That didn't go the way I wanted it to go. And so that was good. Didn't change much, but that was a good starting point for the conversation. But
Sure.
here's what I noticed. I noticed this thing in him where he was delivering bad news to the company. Really bad news. Like it wasn't, someone hadn't died, but it was almost something like that. And
Yep.
it would radically alter the course of the company. So then he created this persona. I could see it happen while he was talking. I could see the persona form in his brain of his audience. And it was in his brain, the persona was, we hate you and we are going to leave this company tomorrow. That
Wow.
was the persona in his head.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started yelling at that persona. He spent the next 20 minutes yelling and threatening and saying shit to that, and I could see it in his head.
Wow.
Meanwhile, his team was like, we love this company, we love your vision, we just want to know what's next. Like, meanwhile, in his
Yep.
head, the persona was, you suck, and we're all quitting tomorrow. And he literally started using that language, like, you guys can all quit tomorrow, and I don't care if you do it, and I'm going to rebuild this company, and fuck all y'all.
Wow.
And And I was able to tell him in the debrief afterwards. I was like, you know what, dude? And he was like, wow, you hit the nail on the head. I started yelling at that persona. And
Yeah.
that,
He
again,
wasn't aware.
emotional intelligence, where you listen, I have to be aware of others' emotions. I have to be able to read the
Yes.
room. And you can't do that if you can't read your own emotions first.
Well, it's also the other aspect of that, which I think you're touching on too, and I just told my teenager this, is that we're meant to be more than just reactive. And especially as leaders, you find you're always just reacting. Oh, now the board wants this. Oh, now the CEO said this. Okay, let's go run and scurry and do this. No, you are in control. And if you kind of approach it from the perspective of, no, I'm a proactive, offensive force in this organization. That's very different than, oh, now I'm only as good as the next circumstance. So you wake up the next day and go, I don't know what's going to happen today. We'll
But
see.
but
Right?
isn't that, and we talk about the personality types of CTOs, and we don't have to go into this too much because I do want to get to your playbook. But
Sure.
isn't it, oftentimes the personality type of the CTO could be classified as supportive on the
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs thing, and it's like we want to
Yep.
we want to support, we want to help, and I think that is a good thing. The the yang to that yin is that we end up doubting ourselves, we end up craving people's approval, we end up
Oh,
overplaying
yeah.
statements. And I often draw it as you can either be below the situation or on top of it. And okay, that's definitely not a Chinese proverb, but but it's you can either sort of be underneath it and have it sort of be your covering or smothering gravity blanket, and you're just living underneath it. Yes, it's
That's right.
comfortable, but it can get too hot underneath that, or you can throw that off and start owning your own results and be like,
Yeah.
I am in service to you, CEO, but I'm working for me.
That's right. I'm a strategic partner. I'm a problem solver, not a problem reporter.
Yes. Man, I wish I
Yeah.
can remember something you said in a previous conversation around this lines. I think we were
Was it,
talking about CTOs need to be problem. You were talking about what you would look for in a VP of engineering.
oh, I know what I said, because I say it all the time, is that I look for people that want to eat problems for breakfast.
People who
This
want to
is
eat problems.
this is what they do. They seek it out. Like you think about a lot of athletes. Like there's the famous stories about Michael Jordan. I'm a big basketball fan, but they love the pressure. They want the ball with the last fourth quarter, last second shot. And if there is no pressure, they create pressure. Because that's what they want. That's how I'm wired, by the way. So it's like, you know, you gotta seek it out. Well, you gotta know that this is my role. My role. If there were no problems, I would not have a role. No, companies don't, and teams don't need leaders to just react all the time. You can find that anywhere.
So do you want to tell me what do you let's use that as a bit of a segue. What do you look
Sure.
for in a VP of engineering?
Oh, I can go on and on now. Yeah. So,
I'm using all those sound bites as marketing tools for everything I do.
go for it.
Thank you.
And number one thing is, what we just talked about, which is a sense of ownership.
So let's first define in your mind. Let's just talk about the difference between the VP of engineering and the CTO in an
Yep.
organization that has both.
Yeah. I think the CTO spends a lot more time on what I'll call the outside, outside of the team. There is a certain mapping that a CTO has to do to map what the team is doing to the language of the rest of the business. And actually, a lot of CTOs don't even realize that. They say, well, they should understand me. Like, no, no, no. They'll never understand you. We're much more technical than they are, right? So the CTO, I think, spends at least half the time on that. And we can talk about some stories about that. Whereas I think the VP is really still more focused on operational excellence, technical excellence of the team itself. And when we go into the playbook, we can use that as context too in terms of where the areas of focus are for both roles. But the VP of engineering is focused on, is my architecture durable? Is my team making decisions every day that improve the durability of our technology and our platform? Are my processes durable, efficient, fast? Process should be like turning on a light switch. Like there's an inverse relationship in an organization. The more you talk about a process, the less it actually works. if it works, you don't need to know
Yeah, yeah.
about it. It just works,
Process is
right?
just a way to program behavior, and if the behavior
Yep,
is there, you don't need a process.
that's right. That's right. So I think there's some differences in terms of what time allocation each role uses and what their priorities are.
So if a uh, so if I'm talking to a founder just briefly, and clearly they would be drawn to the VP of engineering responsibility, right? Because they think we need velocity, we need
Yeah.
process, team, we need better code, quality, all that stuff. At what point are they saying, great, we have that, now we need a CTO because what is happening? Because we're faced with, when would a founder say, oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, I'm missing that role. Oh yeah, that's the CTO role.
I think you had a great video on this, by the way. So I love your answers. But I think that scaling is definitely a thing. So as a company scales, there's a need for representation at that leadership level, even at the board level, even more pragmatically, companies that are looking at an exit of some sort,
Mm,
they need to show that they have a CTO, right? So sometimes it starts there. Um, having that strong leader technology voice in the boardroom, in the
mm,
executive room, sometimes cannot be filled by a VP who's sitting
yeah,
amongst C-level
yeah,
executives.
yeah. I like, and I've recently become more and more aware of that scale aspect, and I like how you put it, of being outside, spending
Yes.
time outside the team, outside, because that provides fresh perspective. You're you're blocking and tackling on a couple prototypes and things where the company should be going. You're scaling, and I think that's the word. I have envisioned lately that if CTO should create space, you should just go. You're in the jungle and you're with that machete and you are chopping things away
I like that.
so that your team can follow. Dude, I just
Yes.
made that up, bro.
I love it.
So creating that space where sometimes the VPE might be saying, we're running, 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 and then the CTO is like, that's great, but what if we unfurl this little plan on this side and we maybe hire a few people? And the VP is like, oh yeah, you're right. We should hire more people. Let's get more budget. Let's work together to to just burrow our way through this jungle that's with ten
Yeah.
foot high trees and grass and snakes.
I think also as a CTO, when you start to get engaged at a higher level and getting feedback from the field and doing all sorts of stuff, you start to anticipate things. So, CTO can look forward and go, well, in a year, if we keep going at this rate, this is where we're going to land. And you start to develop maybe some more innovative ideas, sometimes more disruptive ideas. Like, I get that we're doing well right now, but actually we need to change course, and here's why,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
And I think being that incredible trust relationship between the CTO and the VPE as the lead singer and the guitarist,
I like that.
Bono and The Edge.
You're just on a
Bono would
roll.
be the CTO. Bono, if you're listening, dude, oh, I would so, so,
So
so
sorry.
love to meet you. Please, can I meet you, Bono? Okay. Bono would be the CTO and Edge would be the VP of engineering.
I
Boom.
like it. Boom. Drop the mic.
Robert Palmer would be the CTO. Jimmy Page, just VP of engineering.
Let's just keep going for the rest of the interview.
Good. So I wanna. I know one of the things that have drawn me to you is that ability to meta think about process and what you're seeing, and then codify that
Yeah.
in playbooks and so I want to walk through I think your playbook has four aspects for sort of that pragmatic approach to
Yep.
building your technology organization. Should we just take them point by point and
Yeah, sure.
see where each one
Excuse
takes
me.
us?
Yeah, to give some context, so this is this technology playbook I've developed over the last 20 years. I've used it in every technology role that I've had, and it simply answers the question: what makes a good technology strategy? And there are four quadrants. I've refined it over time over a number of massive technology projects. It has four quadrants, and within every quadrant, there are key initiatives, key red flags you look for, key metrics that you look for, and I now use it as the context to every one of my engagements, and it gives structure because we deal with so much chaos. It gives some structure to okay, how am I measuring success today, right? And what does that look like?
And so the playbook is called what?
I call it the technology playbook.
The technology playbook.
You
Okay,
can tell I'm a very good
we may
marketer.
have to work on that name a little bit,
I
but
think we do. I'm self-aware.
okay. So maybe when would you when should you be looking at this playbook? Is it if I'm a CTO or VPE, I look at this as the playbook for my organization.
Yeah, right from the start.
Okay,
So it's, oftentimes I'll start with a client with a 2-week audit based on that playbook. And so it gives you context for the root causes that we find, for the solutions that we recommend as well.
okay.
And
So let's go
so you
through
start right from the beginning.
yeah. Let's go. What's number one?
Number one is how customer focused is our technology. So
Okay.
customer focused sounds cliche, but this is really about, we need to understand is how do we know that what we're working on is the most relevant thing to work on? Relevance is such a key thing, right? So this is about the health of our product roadmaps. When I talk about health, I'm not just talking about have we broken everything down into user stories for the next few sprints. It's how do you know that what we're working on is actually the thing that's going to be most optimal for the company? And there's a lot of things that go into that, right? What's my interface with the field and with customers? How am I checking myself? Because everyone has their own opinions they formulate. And, one of the big pet peeves I have is someone on the product side always talking about the market. Well, the market is going here. Great, but what about your customers? What are they doing? Now, you have to look at both. It's not a one-dimensional equation. So, I think the ability to engage with customers, and then how do you now translate those feedback loops and that information into the execution cycle on a regular basis?
So is
Customer
this
focus is key.
okay? So is this a good thing then to have your engineers then also be close to customer support?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I'm a big believer in engineers at least doing support for a week or two, especially when they start an organization. Get on the front lines, look at it, see what we're wrestling with. I had one client actually, customer support organization, dealing with 1,500 errors a day on a particular platform. They never brought it up to product or dev because they gave up on those guys. Those guys are so out of touch. They don't know what we're dealing with. So instead, what they pursued was we need more support people to handle all these calls.
Mm.
And then we actually stopped the roadmap and we said, okay, pulled in a couple developers to look at it, and we traced those 1,500 errors to 2 root causes. We prioritized those 2 root causes, making it sound easy, but it was quite a journey. We solved those 2 root causes, and we went to less than 10 errors a day,
Hmm.
and without hiring a single support person. And if we had just kind of worked the system, right, and just kept going the way we're going, we would have doubled the size of the support org and never actually solved the problem, right? So I think bridging the gap between the two is key.
And then I think so. A couple things come up for me. One is the trust relationship between customer service and the devs, as
Oh
you
yeah,
mentioned with the 1,500 errors. I mean, I have CTO organizations where I can see the customer support people being really frustrated. Well, how do you want us to tag this?
yes,
How just you tell us how we need to interface with the customer because clearly you guys don't think this is important. How do I convey that priority? Secondly, what comes up for me is the empathy that the developers should have for their customers.
Yes.
And I am surprised often how developers are not logging in or using their own products. It's
Yeah.
just it's exhausting. You've got so much to do that the idea of just putting yourself in the shoes of the end user, it's almost like you don't want that because I've got so much work to do on this side.
Well, yeah, and I'm not giving, I'm not making excuses for developers, but it's also what is the leadership holding them accountable to? So something I like to do in demos and sprint reviews, even in regular meetings sometimes, is point to a developer. I mean, you have to set the expectation first, right? Everybody needs to be ready, but point to a developer and say, hey, could you log into the product right now and do X, Y, Z? Go ahead, put it on the screen. And make it an okay part of the culture. Like, sure,
Yeah,
no
yeah,
problem. Here
yeah.
you go, right? I just did that, an hour ago. And so I think a big part of it is what you hold people accountable to as well.
Mm.
So I give you another story about one client that I walked into a couple weeks in. It was very clear that the customer service people is a software platform that had been around for a couple of years. Customers were complaining left and right about all sorts of broken windows, issues, there's incidents everywhere. It was pretty unstable. Meanwhile, product organization and dev were just marching down the beat of satisfying sales with new features and kind of basically ignoring the customer service guys. So to make it a point, within a couple of weeks being part of that org, we put a pause on that roadmap, and then I told product to take a back seat, and we went to the customer service folks and we said, your product for the next sprint, what should we work on? And there were 5 teams. We melded all the teams into one team.
Christmas
and
came early.
we did Kanban, right? We said, okay, forget the sprints and Scrum and everything. We're going to meet every morning at 8 a.m., one master backlog of all the customer service issues.
That is a
And
great idea.
part of that was calling the customer service people on their own shit, because sometimes people just like to bitch, right? And then you give them the form, they're like, I don't know what you should work on, right? And then we prioritize things. And I remember in that first forum, we had all the development team there and all customer service meeting together. Never happened before. Every day at 8 a.m. And when they started walking through and explaining, like, well, here's why this is an issue. One of the developers piped up and said, oh, I didn't know that was such a big issue. I could fix that today. Which, by the way, pissed them off even more.
Of course.
Right? But it was ultimately a good thing. And in the 2-week cycle, we ended up fixing more issues than they fixed in the last year.
That is such a critical.
It was so powerful. It was so powerful. And in the retro, we had one guy from customer service kind of pipe up and say, I'll admit, I hated you guys in dev before this happened. And I had this one big client. I would be on the phone with him every Friday, and this customer would have the same complaint every Friday. I got to the point where I ran out of distractions to tell them. I had no solutions. And I just got out of a meeting with them, and they said there's nothing to discuss. Everything is fixed. So I just want to tell you, developers, I want to say thank you.
Wow.
And I want you to know that from now on, I will be your biggest advocate.
Wow.
And sure enough, he was. Like, he really was active. And so it was just a powerful change event.
So do you
for both
think,
teams.
that's brilliant. Do you think that churn and ARPU and do you think that those types of metrics should be in the development team then as well? Churn
Absolutely.
metrics, NPS
Absolutely,
scores.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Yep. And it should be part and parcel of that. And also understanding, like, what can I do today that would affect that NPS score? Like, why is our NPS score lower than last year? Okay, XYZ. Well, what role do I have to play in that? Right?
So so as CTO or as the technical lead, how do I make my team more customer focused? How do I build the trust with everybody who touches the customer? And
Yeah.
how do I integrate those teams so that they can start having empathy for each other and the mammoth tasks that each of those departments are trying to accomplish?
Yeah, sometimes it's as simple as just starting, right? First, you have to determine, are the people that are currently responsible for representing the customer voice to you actually representing their customer voice?
Mm.
So that's a key question that must be resolved.
Okay.
And then you,
And
yeah,
then what? Are you going to the second one?
no, I was gonna, and then you gotta actually look for the people that are representative of the customer voice, no matter what role they are, and bring them into your team. Have them come give a talk in the next weekly team
Mm.
meeting, right? You don't have to wait for all the processes to change and the org to
That is a
change and
great
all this stuff,
idea. That is a great,
right?
and actually do like
There's
the
some,
lunch and learns across. What is the
yes,
second quadrant of this? The technical playbook.
yes, the technology playbook.
Oh, technology.
I don't know, I got to come up with a name for it, but the second one is durable architecture. So this is really the technology area, right? This is all about how do I know? So each quadrant is tied to a basic question, which actually has a very complicated answer and sometimes has no answer at all. For durable architectures, how do I know that with every day and every decision I'm making at the code level, I'm improving the durability of the architecture? And so this is about the health of our architecture, our design, our technology choices, the criteria that drives those choices, the architecture principles, like when do I buy, when do I build, what does that look like? Um, this is about, I see this term now thrown around boardrooms, which is unfortunate. Uh, what's technical debt? What does that mean? And I almost cringe saying that phrase. And,
Wait,
you know,
you cringe at that phrase?
I do. It's so misused now. It's the new
Oh,
Agile.
oh, oh.
It's so misused.
Misused by who?
I've heard it in the boardroom, right?
So people who
With,
have no idea, well, they know what debt is and they know what technical is.
they translate it as my team is making bad decisions. How do they stop making bad decisions? That's really what the
When
concern
in
is.
fact you may be making good decisions, borrowing from the future. I mean,
Maybe.
someone once said to me that technical debt is like debt. You borrow money
Yes,
so that you can
I said
get
that.
Did you say that?
Yes. I'm like, what's the worst thing about debt, right? It's when you don't know what you owe, or when you don't know how you're going to pay it back. And part of, how can you assess technical debt if you don't have a baseline? So part of the issue is like you've got to have a software design or an architecture that you're driving towards. It might be a year out, right? But then I have a baseline where I can look at a
Ah.
daily decision and say, if I make that decision today, is that going to get me closer to that vision, or is that going to move me away from that vision? And so you start to kind of build a bit of a quantifiable framework around what does technical debt actually look
And
like.
so the first question to that is for both the durability of your architecture, which clearly will have some technical debt built into that.
Yeah,
It's the why, like what are we building towards, so we can measure the debt, the price we're
yes,
paying for extra time on architecture, maybe the additional investment we're making in infrastructure and DevOps, as a this is why we're doing it, not oh well this is best practice and we should always be doing things like
that's right.
this.
That's right. And it's played out in different ways. Like, you know,
Best practice the shit out of your startup going down the toilet.
that's exactly it. I mean, unless best practice is relevant to what you're doing, it's just an industry thing,
No,
right?
no,
You
I
gotta,
think best practice is important. I'm just saying
I'm with you.
when you are high on best practice and low on dollars.
Yeah, you're there to make money ultimately
I can best
for the
practice
company.
all kinds of hobbies.
I think, one of the common situations that this plays out to, and that's why I use the word durability, is, well, you know, we were under pressure, so you guys wanted something in 4 weeks, so we did it. And then 3 months later, the very same, when you have to rewrite that thing, the very same people that pressured you to deliver it are going to say, why didn't you do it right the first time?
Mm,
So if you're going to be held accountable one way or the other, you might as well invest some time in the durability of the solution.
yeah. I gave you
And
what you
there's,
want, but the bandwidth cost went from 10 grand a month to $150,000 a month.
sure, yeah. And you
So,
don't get to say, well, I just did what you told me.
No, you
Because
don't.
if you believe you're a technology partner, like we were talking earlier, you believe you're
Well, and
strategic, you believe you have a seat at the table, you don't get to be a victim.
yes, and so that is kind of this earlier part of our conversation alluded to is being that voice that goes to bat for the durability. I mean,
Yes,
that is something that is, and I love that you actually make it part of the quadrant, the title, which is the durability. I think is often we substitute scalability for that, and we think,
yes,
well, I need to scale at all cost. Customers are
correct.
complaining about X. So with the first one of this quadrant was customer focus,
That's right.
taking that, building a durable architecture that can bring to your customers not only what they need today, but what you anticipate they and hundred thousands more of them is going to need, as you grow.
That's
But
correct.
that's very difficult sometimes as the message to the C-suite,
Oh yeah.
which is, I know you all think we should have done X, but I'm telling you now, if we do X, your bandwidth costs will go up to $150,000.
What you just touched on is something that's not often done. Oftentimes, technology leader will expect their business counterparts to just understand it. Well, why don't they get this? It's actually our responsibility to educate and coach our business partners on those risks. Okay, I get it. I get that we have to do this in 2 weeks, but tell you what, if we get another week, we could do X, Y, Z, and then we won't have to come back to the table. And you present those things. Now, sometimes you might go into it with eyes wide open, understanding the cost and the risk, and still make a decision to incur technical debt. But at least you're going through the exercise of understanding what that means and not being surprised. I always say that you don't rewrite a system by surprise. It happens over time, over thousands and thousands of daily decisions that build up, and then all of a sudden, one day you got to rewrite it. And to a business leader, it's almost like, what just happened? We just woke up and now you tell me I have to rewrite the whole system? What happened here?
Yeah.
Right? But if you approach every situation with durability, you're training them to think in that way. You're
Mm.
training them that you're going to approach things in that way. They might not always say yes, but now they know you are carrying a serious responsibility for building that
So when it
durability.
comes to architecture and durability, are you safely in the column of it's almost always a bad idea to rewrite stuff? I mean,
Yes.
to re-architect platforms.
Yes,
R-
and this could be a whole session by itself. I've been part of massive legacy rewrites as well. Um, there is inherent in that. I mean, I think in a minority of time, it's relevant, right? It's right, but it is riddled with risk. It is a high degree of failure, and invariably there are people that I'll say it this way have an arrogance about, oh, we can rewrite this in a year, oh, we can, but what they don't realize is, number one, that legacy system pays everybody's salaries and has done so for many years. That legacy system has all sorts of business logic embedded over the years that there is no way you could replicate through a documented requirements process. I don't care how
Yeah,
accurate
it's
it
like,
is.
hey, let's
You
take
know,
what's worked for us and let's shit can it and let's
right,
just redo all of it.
right,
Why are people still doing that? And you know what? The
right, and
replatforming is the extreme version. I am
yes,
going to go out on a limb and say versioning your releases is another way of kind of doing that. Piling
yeah,
up the releases. We don't ship software on CD-ROMs anymore, dude. So you can you can iteratively insert and make changes to your architecture that doesn't have to be this, oh, and I think that's a technique sometimes that founders or C-suite circle jerk themselves towards. Hey, let's just make that version so and so, and we'll pile everything, waterfall everything into that version. And then you
yeah,
fork the code, and then a year later, you still have forked code.
that's right. And here's something else to think about. I think will blow your mind. So the way I like to think about it when people approach it that way is when we think about ourselves. and how companies treat us. They say, oh, well, I don't have a voice. I get treated with this, I get treated with that. I'm not valued. I'm not this. We've all been in that position, right? That is exactly what you're doing to the legacy system. You're telling the legacy system, you don't have a value. You don't have a voice. I don't care about your level of experience. You're doing exactly what you don't want to be
We have
done to
just
you as a human
entered the
being.
matrix
We've
because
just entered the
Emad
matrix.
is talking to his legacy systems.
That's right.
Do you have one-on-ones with him?
I love them. I embrace them. All the green code.
So when you think about so how does durability manifest in our leadership style? Because we have to sell that as an expense to our C-suites,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then it translates into a culture of excellence into your dev team, right?
Absolutely, because they're seeing that you're advocating for that too. And when you're not advocating for it, the message you send to your team is, I'm a victim. I will listen to you, team, and I will hear you, but actually, I'm not going to bring that hard conversation to the table. So we're only as good as right up to this point, and then we're not going to be able to change anything after that, because the minute the CEO tells me something, I guess we're just going to do whatever he wants. And then you start to kind of question, well, why do I need a CTO then? If all we're doing is just going to follow what the CEO does, why does the CEO need a CTO again? Like, and I understand I am not underestimating the pressures. I know all too well those pressures, but we need to be that voice.
I
And
feel like
you train the organization on that, right? You train them
yes,
that I am the advocate for that voice.
yes. I think in this quadrant, it's probably super helpful to translate the consequence in terms of dollars and cents.
Yes. In the same language that they understand.
Yes. So
Absolutely.
the 100 grand,
or I've used like
the 100 grand you're going to
pain
spend
index.
on this. The 100 grand you're going to spend on this is going to prevent a $10 million disaster.
Yep, and I've used different metrics like a pain index, like a score.
Pain in the
It's
ass
like, oh,
index.
this is going to cost, or
Oh,
time, money,
a pain
cost.
index.
Yeah, of some sort, or something that kind of shows them in their language as well. The other thing I think is powerful too is that in the few times you do get that decision approved, reinforce the hell out of it. So once you go and build something durable, now loop back and show your team and the executives, hey, we decided to take an extra 2 weeks to do this. Look at the benefits we got. Check it out. And people start to see, oh, wow, okay, cool.
And I think that's probably where I know your question was rhetorical, but for the CEO, CTO, the C-suite to know that there is a technical leader on the team that is fighting for the best interest of the business
100%.
in a healthy juxtaposition with a VP of engineering who is fighting for the quality and the durability of the code that, if done well, will attract more A players to that. Like, wow, I want to be on that team.
Exactly. I want to be on that team. Yeah.
Good. Well, that's great. So what is number 3, brother?
Number 3 is a deliberate people strategy. So everyone says, oh, yeah, people are important to me. No one will ever say people are not important. But actually, in actions and how you spend your time, you actually need a very deliberate strategy. We spend a lot of time on very specific strategy around architecture and technology and all sorts of stuff, but we don't do it with people. We leave it to HR or, HR wants me to do succession planning. Okay, let me go do that. So you actually need an engineering approach to how you're managing and leading people. And I said the number one metric is how you're growing other people. But part of it is like, what does accountability look like on your team? Like day to day, what does that mean? Like you called out the truth with your CEO when you were presenting. Part of it is like, hey, let's call stuff out. What does it mean to deliver together? And even building some metrics around how you're growing leadership on your technology teams.
Now, this is more than just one-on-ones, right?
Much more than that. Absolutely. And even in one-on-ones, what's the point of a one-on-one? Well, just like what's the point of a stand-up? You just get there and it's mechanical and you go through the motions.
So by deliberate, you mean we are actively helping our teams design their careers?
Design their careers, design their roles, design how they fit into the context of the vision. That they have a role to play, that they have a relevance to the team. I think that's really big.
Hmm.
Even take something as tactical as performance reviews. People struggle with performance reviews at the end of the year, right? Oh, I've got 20 performance reviews to do, or I've got 10 performance reviews to do. But if in my one-on-ones every week, I'm taking notes about what that person is doing well, what they're not doing well, what they're improving. I'm citing specific examples and situations. Now my performance review is really easy because I have the conversation every week for a year, and it becomes no problem. And oh, by the way, to the person that's getting the review, there are no surprises because we've been talking about this all year,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So I'm just giving you a tactical example of that, but that's about time investment. That's about being deliberate about your one-on-ones. That's about being deliberate about your reviews, and being very clear with the team and saying, look, as a leader, I believe you are going to get no surprises in your career here. And I'm going to do everything in my power to do that.
Now, does this quadrant include hiring people?
Absolutely. So I get heavily involved with hiring, recruiting, and retention as well on teams. And how do we know we're bringing the right people? How do we know we need people, first of all? Nobody really considers that one. And then, what am I doing to onboard them, to retain them?
What do you think is the reason technical leaders are reluctant to hire people when clearly the business needs more people? Why are they reluctant to hire?
I've seen both. I've seen technology leaders reluctant. I've seen technology leaders pushing for it. Right? I wish I could do all these things for you, but I need 20 more people.
But I feel like pushing for it is almost always a good idea.
I think so too. I think growing and scaling is important. Um, you were asking why are people reluctant? I think that in the cases that I've seen where technology leaders are reluctant, it's because, oh, I can do this myself,
And
right?
that is
And
such a
it's, yeah, no,
prevalent.
we got this. We're going to do this, and it's almost like some people interpret it as admitting failure,
Yes.
right? Like, oh, I couldn't get it done with the people that I have.
And that's where I think this we spoke about this earlier is the CTO is the person who needs to create that space. Like
Yes.
there are gaps here, guys. Let's fill this with people. Let's bring in people. And I think the flaw the flaw often and then this maybe goes a little bit of a contrarian view, but I think sometimes as CTOs uh, we want to first understand the technology before we consider bringing it in.
Yes.
And the contrary to that is because we don't fully understand it, we don't think it's necessary to build that as part of our durable architecture.
Oh yeah. No, I
The
think that's a
same
great
goes
point.
for people, which is because I can't imagine adding someone to my team, because that is admitting failure. I think I have to figure these things out myself. And because I can't figure it out myself, I need to rather just spend the time to familiarize myself with these technologies when really you should be saying, hallelujah, I have no idea how this is done.
Yep.
I'm not saying you plead ignorance and say, well, I can't know anything. I think you should always, like you said, always have your feet firmly planted in tech. There's no
Yes.
reason why you can't fire up a quick Terraform script and see if you can auto-scale a few instances with your fingers in a Vim session.
Absolutely.
But
And
there's the mindset of, well, I shouldn't be doing that, and therefore I can't consider Terraform, and therefore I don't really need DevOps people, and because I don't have an appreciation for how complex it's all getting, And I'm talking brutally early startups, obviously. I think CTOs of larger enterprises know this already. You can't possibly
Yes.
carry everything in your head. But I do think that I see it more often than not where the startup CTOs are reluctant to hire people, and they should be.
Yes, I've seen that. And there are two interesting insights I've noticed off that as well, just to springboard off what you just said. So one is that there's a really interesting um, side effect with technology teams, technology leaders. And this is one example. So when we kind of just take it on our shoulders and do it, or hey, there's a software release, but we had to stay up 2 nights to do it. You know what the business is thinking? They're thinking, oh, they got it done. I don't understand why they need more people. I mean, ultimately the release happened, right? But because as technologists, we're not communicating the pain. We focus on getting it done. We train our business counterparts into a comfort zone that I don't understand why he needs 5 people. Like, what are you talking about? Like, the release was fine last time. But yeah, it was fine, but our whole team stayed up for 2 nights. That's not sustainable. But we don't say that, we just kind of get the job done. And so part of it is also you got to express the pain of like, this is what's going on, and it's not sustainable.
As opposed to hiding that, not surfacing
That's
that.
right. That's right.
Hmm.
And I've also seen that even just one hire dramatically changes the team to the point where, weeks into it, you're thinking, how did I survive without this person? Right? So,
Do you think it's because it it requires a level of vulnerability that people
oh,
struggle
yes,
to surface?
100%. Yeah. We're, we have a very high tolerance for pain in technology.
I love it, brother. Yeah, I think in our industry, where we do love the ones and zeros and the predictability of code, it's
Yes,
difficult to work with the soft, chewy, mushy brain cells of human beings.
absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
How are we looking on time? You good?
Yes.
Can we do? You seem slightly restless.
No, I'm good.
You want to do number 4?
Let's do that. By the way, with the people side of things, I mean, we can dedicate a whole session to it. There are some crazy things that I do with teams to get to that vulnerability,
You're gonna have to. You're
and
gonna
to
have to share.
get to the
You're
truth.
gonna have to share 1 or 2 of those right now.
So, if do we have time for me to share? I
Yes.
know. Okay.
I have a hard
Um,
stop at 11:30, so I still have
okay.
35 minutes.
I can go over by 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, great.
Um, so I'll tell you one thing I do, and this is part of like, okay, how do we build in an exercise? I've done this with large teams. I've done this with small teams. I have a number of things that I do. So one
Do
thing
you
is
all
so
stand in a row and then the person has to blindfold and then they have to like fall on their back and then everyone has to catch them?
no,
Oh, okay.
nothing like that. Nothing like that. But so for example, with uh, some teams I've done where teams are struggling with accountability, as an example, right? Oh, people are not accountable. People are not accountable. People are not accountable. Okay, you hear this, blah 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 blah, right? And everyone thinks culture is this like ambiguous cloud that's outside of themselves. Culture is a personal responsibility. It's essentially the stories that I tell every day. If I spent my day bitching and moaning about the company, congratulations, that's my contribution to the culture. If I spent my day delivering and helping people, that's my contribution, right? That's culture to me. It's a individual accountability. So anyway, with accountability issues, and you can apply this to other things too. I've taken teams where, team in the room, or it could be multiple teams. Okay, we all have problems with accountability. Great. So on the wall, we have a 5 score system. You put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where 3 is you're accountable. You're doing your job. 4 is I'm accountable for not just my team or myself, but for my peers. 5 might be I'm accountable for everything in the company. 1 is poor, right? So I kind of put these descriptions up, and people are looking at me like, okay, what is he going to do with this,
Is
right?
one poor or is one just you have no accountability?
No accountability,
Okay, which is
right? No
which is
accountability.
obviously bad.
Obviously bad. Yes. So I tell people, great. I want you to line up under the number you think you are. So essentially like building a living bar graph, right? So people, and I've done this over the years with many teams, people play it safe. Most people go under 3. The people that are really accountable, they go under 2. Maybe some people go under 4. They go under 2 because they don't want to give themselves credit or whatever it is, right? Nobody goes under 1. Nobody goes under 5. Sometimes 1 or 2 people go under 5. I say, great, look around the room. Take some time to look around. So they're standing there. And then I go one by one. So let's say I stood under number 2. I say, great. Who agrees that Emad is a number 2? So people might raise their hand, and some people will be kind of shocked, like, oh, do I say the truth? Do I not? Who agrees Emad's lower? Who agrees Emad's higher? Well, thank you. Who agrees Emad's higher, right? And I might, if the environment allows, I might ask why. I might like, okay, hey, Etienne, why do you think Emad's lower? Well, yesterday he did this and this. Okay, the majority wins. So what I do is actually physically calibrate people to the majority. So if the majority of people think that I'm higher, they think I'm not a 2, they think I'm a 3. And we go through that whole exercise and that live feedback, I physically move myself to number 3. And we do this for every individual until everyone's physically calibrated. And that exercise blows people's minds because it's automatic live feedback right there. You're actually showing everyone your own self-concept. Right? Hey, I believe I'm a 4. All of a sudden, you're downgraded into a 2. Invariably, in the majority of these exercises over the years, most people get upgraded or they stay the same. Very few times. It becomes an exercise where you're actually building people up. And
I think it's tricky. It's probably tricky to not have that degrade into like a group shaming thing, right?
It is tricky, yeah. But it's also if it's truth. So when there's some rules of engagement.
Yeah,
Right? One of them is no opinions.
Yeah.
It's you got to give concrete examples so people can wrestle with that. And it's a way to kind of jump the team from we're just doing the same thing every day to what's the truth of what's going on. Let's just cut to that, and it sets the tone for the rest of my engagement with them. Right? It's like this is how we're going to operate. This is how we're going to talk. And I do a number of things like that. So I just wanted to highlight
I like that.
People's strategy.
I like the idea of bringing out into the open what everyone's carrying in their own heads.
100%.
Emad, let's talk about the 4th quadrant.
4th one is what I call Pragmatic Agile.
And you gave a talk on this, which was mind-blowing.
I did. So, everyone says they're Agile, but it's bullshit. And
dude, them fighting words.
That's right. Oh yeah.
What do you mean everyone says they're Agile, but it's bullshit?
Well, now it's such a buzzword with everybody. And you hear business people talking about it, you hear board members talking about it, you hear technology people talking about it. We've lost sight of what it really means. We lost sight of the original principles why it even started. Like, I don't give a shit if you do a stand-up for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. I don't give a shit about that. Like, so you're going to stand around every day and go, I worked on 1, 2, 3. Today I'm working on 4, 5, 6. No impediments.
Tiring.
Okay. Like, why are we doing this? I would stand up and go, why are we doing this? We should just not meet every day then. Like, this is a waste of time.
Why are we doing it?
It's because at some point, we're very, like as human beings, we're very comfortable with structure. And we fall more in love with structure than the spirit behind why it was created in the first place, right? So it's much more easier for me to go into a stand-up and go, I worked on 1, 2, 3, then I'm working 4, 5, 6, no impediments, and move on. It's much harder for me to say, you know what? For the last year, I have been so fucking frustrated that I cannot deploy to this environment. Are we going to do something about this today or not? That to me is a much more valuable stand-up or discussion, right? And I got to get this fixed today.
So do you have guidelines? Do you have just a off-the-cuff guideline for what stand-ups should do to uncover what you just said? Is it just like, hey, it's more like a 15-minute check-in on everyone's emotional state, or what? No,
I mean, I still like to follow the structure, but I do key in on the impediments piece. So every day there's an impediment. There's something. There's always something. and also key in on, do you need help? Hey, so this is part of the overall definition of Agile for me is, what are we measuring? What are we learning from the measurement? What are we doing based on that learning? Measure, learn, do, right? And so if I have metrics in place where I'm saying, hey, our team's actually a lot slower coming out of the gate in this sprint than we ever have been. What's going on, guys? How can we help this? So it's not a shaming. It's not like, hey, I noticed you're not, checking code as much as you did or whatever. It's like, what's going on? What's the root cause here? Well, this and this. Okay, how can I help you with that? Let's go fix that. And then the next day should be different. You should go into the next stand-up different. Like, it should actually iterate. That's why you have the stand-up. So, I think I like the structure. It's just about what you do about
I
it.
wonder if one should flirt with the reversing the questions and say,
That's
do you
interesting.
have impediments? Oh yeah, I'm trying to do X.
Yes.
Okay, then you don't try and answer it. You just go to, oh, so what did you work on?
Yes.
Oh, I was trying to do Z, but then I ran into problem X.
And part of it, Etienne, too, is to bring that to the surface is what we measure. So one of the things I like to measure is impediment closure velocity. So if I'm tracking impediments and the owners of the impediments, I'm actually tracking how fast, once you get assigned, do you resolve an impediment. The clock starts. And I hold people accountable to that. And I incorporate that into performance reviews too, as well, in some cases. So if people know that, they get a lot more serious about reporting and resolving. And I've even built some healthy competitions around it. Like, fastest impediment closure team of the sprint was Team A. Congratulations, you get a gift
I
card.
am realizing now how easy it is to not talk about the impediments because you're focused on what you did and
Yes.
what you're going to work on. But then it's so easy to kind of fly by what is the blocker. And if you like you said, if you have the mindset that there's always an impediment, tell me that there isn't an impediment, then
Right.
then I think it opens the door for everyone to think, what is stopping me from getting this ticket addressed?
Yeah.
It's
There's all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's just sort of a lulled. The stand-up, I completely understand. It's a bit of a lull. It's a bit of a, I'm still working on this thing. Yesterday I did, and it becomes exponentially harder when people are in different time zones.
Oh, yes.
And what other aspects of Agile do you think is bullshit that people think that they're doing, but they're not really doing? Or what other tips do you have in this quadrant?
This is a whole nother session by itself. So I think one thing is the focus on experiential knowledge. We talked about this, like knowing the product, knowing the customers. Operating from a place of first-hand knowledge is really key, and holding people accountable to that. So what I've seen in sprint reviews and sprint meetings and all sorts of stuff is opinions, right? People come in and say, oh, well, I heard, blah, blah, blah. This does not support our scalability goals. And then all of a sudden people will scurry and start to spin up meetings and, okay, we got to discuss this and debate this. And actually the principle that I like to use is the person that's making the claim is responsible to defend the claim. So I will not spend a second of time on your opinion until you prove it. There will be no meetings, there will be no discussions. So as engineers, if I come to the table
Science.
when I say, hey, I believe this actually doesn't support our scaling goals, I actually did this POC to prove it, let me show it to you. Okay, now we have something to talk about, right? But if all you're doing is coming to the table with an opinion, I'm sorry.
And I think that's where the
I'm not
pragmatism
spending time on it.
comes in, right? Let's be pragmatic
That's
about
exactly
the
right.
claims we're making.
That's exactly right. The other piece of the Agile piece is using metrics for good. I think people don't know how to use metrics, and it's a big part of what I do with clients as well, is building dashboards based on my playbook, but also based on, are we delivering value? What's our velocity? What's our quality? But using that, sometimes just getting to the dashboard is hard enough. But once people get to the dashboard, then it's all up for misinterpretation, is also coaching people on how do you operationalize those metrics. So you got to use them in your day-to-day. Like I was talking about the impediment closure velocity. all right, that's a metric. I'm going to use it to make sure that my teams, my leaders, are resolving impediments for their team, which means that the teams feel they have a voice. We're improving scalability of the org. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are part of that. So how do I use metrics for good to drive towards the goals that I want and the vision that I want for that team?
Do you, and I can imagine that those metrics are super helpful at the non-technical level for CEOs or VPs of
Sure, some of
product,
them.
or
Yeah.
or do you mean that the metrics are for the team by the team?
Yeah, I believe there's different layers of metrics. There are metrics that are specific for the team and should never be out of the team's scope because, for example, a burn down doesn't belong in the boardroom. I believe that. A burn down is for the team to self-adjust, look at each other and go, oh, okay, at the rate we're going, how do we help each other here because we're going slower? Or, hey, we're going faster, we could pick up some more work, right? A boardroom looks at that and goes, you should be perfect. Why aren't you on the perfect line? What's going on? Well, your estimates suck. Well, what are you doing about your estimates? And it becomes this whole other conversation. So I think there's different
Mm,
levels, and I've actually built levels as part of the playbook.
mm,
So there's team level metrics. I have a number of them. Then there's like CTO level metrics, and then there's business leader level metrics,
dude.
and then there's board metrics.
When you said
And
CTO level metrics, I got the chills.
oh yeah, there's such a thing. Um, so I've built dashboards with CTOs for CTOs where, hey, you walk in to your workday, it's the first thing you look at, and then you determine like what are my interpretations of these numbers. For example, for one CTO, all she cared about was what is the stability of my platform, what are we doing about quality, and what is my release cadence. And so literally it was 3 metrics with a trend analysis. And that's an aggregation of all sorts of other things that are going on at the team level. But at the end of the day, that's what she cared about. So that's what she looked at. And she could drill down into other granularities if she wanted, but we sort of boiled it down to ultimately, what do you care about every day? Let's get you visibility of that.
Hmm.
Right?
Mm.
Yeah. This is
That we need. How do I get this?
I'm happy to work with
I
you
would
on
love
it.
to explore that because so many people just don't know what they need to measure.
It's a lot of work that I'm doing now. I've done it for years, but even more so now in the COVID era
Oh,
as well.
oh.
So I also have lots of example dashboards I built, and
I
we can definitely work through that together.
So if people on this call want to get a hold of you and flock to the Californian Egyptian,
The Egyptian lover. Yes.
um, do you can they email you?
They can email me. They can get me on LinkedIn. They can get me on some CTOs. Um, yeah, there's a number of
Okay, well
ways
I will
to
link
reach
I
out.
will link to all of that in the notes.
Great.
Imad, wow man, that's like 2 hours just flew by.
I feel like we could just keep
I feel
going.
like we
Yeah.
I feel like we just did the intro.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Like each one of these can be its own
I
session
think we should let's
easily.
book it. Let's
Let's do that.
freaking take 2 hours on each one of these, dude.
Let's do that. I would love to do that.
Do you do you offer people like a quick assessment of where they're at, or sort of just,
Yep.
hey, I don't know if I'm the right customer for you or if you're the right person to help me. Let me fill out this form and let's see if budget wise, size wise, time wise, we're a good fit.
I don't do a form per se, but I do offer to spend a day with either individual leader or their team and make a very, high level assessment
Mm,
of here's where I feel the opportunities are. And then if we engage, typically I'll do a 2 week audit. Usually within 2 weeks, I already have an
mm,
assessment
mm,
in place,
mm.
and they get to see those
Ah,
findings along the
okay,
way
okay.
as well. And then we sort of work together on, all right, here's a prioritized backlog of initiatives that we could attack. Here's the traceability to the root causes that I found. The root causes are traceable to the examples that are very concrete. Now, well, let's determine what we're going to do, and then we may work together on doing those things.
Okay, brother. Well, apparently you don't have any questions for me, so I think we're done.
It's always a pleasure. I always love
Okay,
talking to
brother.
you. So
It's good to talk to you. Now,
thank you for this
so
opportunity.
I'm going to say goodbye, but don't hang up.
Sure.
Bye-bye. I said goodbye. Don't hang up. Okay, thank you, brother. Let me stop this.
Yeah.
And stop this.